2020 is bound to be one heck of a year for games, and with a new generation of consoles just around the corner, some of these upcoming releases might just represent the swan songs for their respective platforms. Luckily, they seem to be going out with a bang. Doom wasn't a game that really needed rescuing, but 2016's reboot was a welcome addition to the franchise anyway. id Software's modern take on its flagship franchise preserved all of the speedy brutality that first made Doom an international sensation, and added a few new wrinkles along the way. But you want more, right? Well, you're in luck, because you're getting it. Doom Eternal doesn't radically upend its predecessor's formula, but it does feature a few cool new gimmicks plus a number of new multiplayer modes, including Battle Mode, which pits two-player controlled demons against a lone space marine. Or to put it another way, it's id doing what id does best. The company has been making Doom for a quarter of a century, and judging by everything they've shown so far, they've got yet another hit on their blood-soaked hands. After Resident Evil 7 reinvented Capcom's genre-defying horror franchise, and the Resident Evil 2 remake proved that there's still life in Resident Evil's classic formula, Project Resistance seemed like an odd choice for the next big release. It's not even a survival horror adventure. Instead, it's an asymmetrical competitive game that pits a team of 4 survivors against a single player-controlled opponent called the Mastermind. In Project Resistance, the team never meets the Mastermind directly. Instead, the Mastermind sits behind their ultra-powerful control panel, following the survivors' progress via security camera and unleashing traps and monsters as they see fit. For the team, it's a virtual Resident Evil escape room, controlled by a human intelligence. For the Mastermind, it's a Resident Evil maker and supervillain simulator. Traditional? Nope. Interesting? You bet. The Resident Evil franchise is full of mediocre spin-offs, but Project Resistance shouldn't be one of them. Though Capcom has rebranded Project Resistance as Resident Evil Resistance and plans to release it as part of the Resident Evil 3 remake package, this clever spin on the multiplayer experience could still make a meaningful contribution to the series. Yes, at long last, a Final Fantasy VII Remake is coming. Well, part of it is at least. At E3 2019, Final Fantasy VII director Yoshinori Kitase confirmed that the first episode of Final Fantasy VII Remake fills 2 Blu-ray discs worth of content, and yet only takes players through Midgar, the original game's opening area. Intriguingly, Kitase doesn't know how many more games it will take to finish the whole story, nor how long they'll take to make. Luckily, Final Fantasy VII Remake's battle system works surprisingly well, and seeing Square Enix's most beloved characters rendered in such loving detail is never going to get old. And of course, any fan of the original Final Fantasy VII will tell you that Midgar is one of that game's best settings, so it's going to be great to get to know it a whole lot better. If you thought The Last of Us was brutal, you ain't seen nothing yet. In The Last of Us Part 2, a direct sequel to Naughty Dog's award-winning action-adventure game, Joel's teenage charge Ellie takes center stage for a story that looks even more harrowing than the series' inaugural outing. The Last of Us 2 will also ramp up the original's tense survival game-style combat, and introduce a bunch of new characters and post-apocalyptic settings to explore. At least some familiar faces will be there to guide players through all the horror. Both Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson return as Joel and Ellie respectively, while series creator Neil Druckmann is back as co-writer and co-director. For a long time, not much was known about CD Projekt Red's upcoming sci-fi RPG Cyberpunk 2077, but recently a few details about the game have become clear. The game has been in development since at least 2012, and it's a spin-off of Cyberpunk 2020, a pen-and-paper role-playing game. It's set in a sprawling and wide-open metropolis called Night City, featuring a vast number of characters who all speak multiple languages. If you want to know what everyone is saying, you'll either need to buy in-game translator implants or load up on language courses at the local community college. Players will also be able to experience other characters' memories using something called a brain dance, as well as kit out their characters in traditional RPG style. There'll also be a Cyberpunk 2077 multiplayer mode in addition to the single-player storyline. Cyberpunk 2077 is supposed to be a number of orders of magnitude bigger than the developer's last game, The Witcher 3, but should also be just as densely packed with stories to experience, characters to meet, and things to do, and that's a big undertaking, which is probably why over 400 people are currently working on the game. So sure, Cyberpunk 2077 sounds incredibly ambitious, but as The Witcher 3 proves, CD Projekt Red know what they're doing. It's hard to follow up one of the greatest games of all time, but if any studio can do it, it's these guys. Don't panic. What if you spent your whole life fighting a war, only to wake up one day to learn that you'd lost? That seems to be the premise behind Halo Infinite, which closed out Microsoft's E3 2019 with a plot-heavy trailer. And no, Microsoft didn't showcase any gameplay, but come on, it's Halo. You know the score here. It's a first-person sci-fi shooter with a story-based campaign, alongside some of the most compelling multiplayer in the business. The more pressing question here is just how Halo Infinite will take advantage of Microsoft's new console, Xbox Series X. As a Series X launch title, Halo Infinite seems like the perfect place for Microsoft to show off what the device is capable of. For now, it's clear that Xbox Series X will drastically reduce load times, that it has some ultra-powerful hardware under the hood, and that it's optimized for game streaming and the Xbox Game Pass. That's all cool enough, but none of it sounds like a system seller, yet. But if Microsoft can trust anyone to bring the heat, it's Master Chief. Did somebody say story missions? Yes, that's right, we're finally going to get to know what Overwatch is all about. While Blizzard's ultra-popular hero shooter has some pretty detailed lore and a whole roster full of memorable characters, the game's plot has been confined to spin-off media like comics and cinematics, a couple of limited-time events, and the occasional line of in-game dialogue.
Gerard was a fool to love someone like you.
You don't know anything about him.
In Overwatch 2, that's going to change. In addition to the 6-on-6 multiplayer battles that Overwatch is known for, the upcoming sequel will introduce 4-player co-op missions that tell an actual story. But that's not all. In addition to the PvE content, Overwatch's core competitive mode will get a major revamp with new maps, new heroes, and new modes. In Push, for example, 2 teams will try to escort a payload to their respective goals by hassling a friendly robot. Overwatch 2's PvP upgrades will come to the first Overwatch as well, but elements like the story missions and souped-up graphics will be exclusive for the sequel. If you really want to make the most of the Overwatch universe, you're gonna have to double dip. Creator Michel Ancel never envisioned his 2003 adventure game Beyond Good and Evil as a one-and-done deal. It was supposed to be the first part of a trilogy, kicking off a brand new franchise that Ubisoft could exploit for years and years to come. Then the disappointing sales happened. Beyond Good and Evil has since gone on to become a minor cult classic, but it really did deserve better. In fact, Ubisoft's North American executive director, Laurent Detac, says that the game's failure is still his biggest mistake, business-wise. Still, Beyond Good and Evil's fanbase has been clamoring for a follow-up for ages. Ubisoft promised one back in 2008 and then went silent on the matter. It took almost a decade for them to reveal more, but as E3 2018, the following is clear. Beyond Good and Evil 2 is a prequel, features an open world and custom-made characters, will allow players to explore numerous planets, and going off of the trailers, is certifiably bonkers.
I have no idea what you mean. Our food is healthy, invigorating.
It also won't be out for a while. Ubisoft said a while back that they were hoping to get a Beyond Good and Evil 2 beta ready for fans by the end of 2019, but that hasn't materialized yet. Inevitably, the game won't be ready for mass consumption until 2020 at the earliest, and that's assuming that Ancel's team manages to tighten up their deadlines. But as Beyond Good and Evil 2's past history shows, that's much easier said than done. After years of denials, unconfirmed rumors, and one deeply unsatisfying tease, Diablo IV is finally official, and it looks like Blizzard is doing its best to make up for past mistakes. Gone is Diablo III's brightly colored cartoony art style in favor of a pitch-black gothic vibe, a la Diablo 2. Classes like the Sorceress, another Diablo 2 favorite, are back after missing the last installment too. There are also more ways to upgrade your characters than ever before, meaning you can put together a build that perfectly suits your preferred monster-bashing style. All this, and there are a bunch of brand new online functions to boot. See, unlike previous Diablo games, Diablo IV takes place in a shared open world. Not only can you tackle the game's various activities in any order that you want, but other players will show up on your map as you roam the overworld. You don't have to group up with them, but they'll be there regardless, and there'll be PvP too. Basically, it's Destiny's framework in Diablo's world. So clear out your calendars, this one is going to keep you busy for a while. Forget whatever else they had on the cards. After Nintendo's E3 2019 presentation, people were only talking about one thing. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is getting a sequel. Nintendo didn't reveal a title or a release date or any plot information, but it didn't matter. The Breath of the Wild sequel stole the show anyway. Since then, fans have analyzed every frame of Nintendo's Breath of the Wild sequel trailer for clues. Zelda can be seen adventuring alongside Link, sporting a stylish, shorter hairdo, leading many to assume that she'll be a playable character. A mummy featured in the video Ezio looks a lot like Ganondorf too. People think they've caught glimpses of the Twilight Mirror in a few shots, and it sure looks like Link is infected by an old ancient evil. Meanwhile, series producer Eiji Onuma claims that the sequel will be even darker than Majora's Mask, the creepiest game in the Zelda series, and might be influenced by games like Skyrim and Red Dead Redemption. Either way, the next chapter of the Breath of the Wild saga is probably years away, but if it's even half as good as the original, it'll be totally worth the wait. It's hard to describe what makes Psychonauts so special. It's not just a premise which throws a bunch of psychic-powered kids into an otherwise normal summer camp, mixing up super-powered shenanigans with all kinds of cartoony teen angst. It's not merely the inventive levels either, which use the environment itself to explore Psychonauts' quirky characters. The game's weird sense of humor certainly helps too. Not that it did much for the game's sales. These days, Psychonauts is a cult classic, but it absolutely bombed at release. But considering everything the first game had going for it, it's no wonder that fans have been clamoring for a sequel for a decade and a half, and soon they'll finally be getting one. Back in 2015, players hungry for more Psychonauts contributed almost $4 million to help fund the long-awaited sequel, and if developer Double Fine followed through on their promises, it looks like Psychonauts 2 will be worth the wait. As in the first game, you'll play through the game as Raz, the freshly minted Psychonaut agent who uses abilities such as telekinesis and pyrokinesis to solve puzzles and tackle platforming challenges. Obviously, the graphics will be a little better than in the last Psychonauts, and the 3D platforming is getting some much needed tweaks, but most of all, Psychonauts 2 is, well, it's more Psychonauts. That's great news, and it's about time too. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag is probably one of the best Assassin's Creed games ever made, thanks almost entirely to its pirate theme, which let Ubisoft's developers take Assassin's Creed 3 well-received ship sections and bring them to the next level. In fact, Black Flag's naval battles were so much fun that Ubisoft decided to give them their own game. It's called Skull and Bones, and it's looking pretty ship-shape.
And really bad eggs. Drink up, me hearty yo-ho.
Want to hit the seas solo and build a pirate empire all by your lonesome? You can. Despite the focus on epic 5-on-5 sea fights during Skull and Bones' big reveal, the game will also have a dedicated single-player campaign. Even better, the solo missions will be fully integrated with Skull and Bones' multiplayer content. Basically, Skull and Bones will have something for everyone, no matter how they want to play the game. It'll also have a whole fleet of different ship types and an arsenal full of weapons like cannons, mortars, and rockets to choose from. You'll be able to board other people's ships, conquer enemy territory, and scour the Indian Ocean for hidden treasure. All that, and Skull and Bones will constantly improve too. Ubisoft Singapore say they've been listening to fans since the game entered development, and that they plan to keep that back and forth going for as long as possible. Ubisoft's Watch Dogs franchise has always been wildly ambitious, but it has also struggled to live up to its lofty goals. As a result, you can understand why some people are skeptical of Watch Dogs Legion's big hook. Ubisoft claims that the game will let you recruit and play as any person in Legion's dystopian take on post-Brexit London, with the storyline adjusting accordingly. Maybe that's too good to be true, but so far it looks like Watch Dogs Legion will live up to the hype. Hands-on reports say that identifying and recruiting agents is just as fun as it sounds. Once you have a character on your roster, you'll need to use them carefully too. Every character has a different skill set, which opens up a variety of different ways to handle missions, but if they die, they're gone for good. Ubisoft obviously know how to make open-world games, and Watch Dogs 2 was a big step forward, so stay cautiously optimistic on this one. If Legion works, it could be 2020's most impressive game. It took almost 15 years, but thanks to the 1-2 punch of Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami, Sega's long-running series has finally broken through in the West. Now that Yakuza is a global sensation though, what comes next? Why, changing it completely of course. Yakuza, like a dragon, isn't an action-heavy brawler. In fact, it's a turn-based RPG. Yep, that's right. Instead of punching, kicking, or throwing your opponents directly, you'll select your moves from a menu. The action doesn't stop during combat though. Pedestrians will go about their business as you fight, and characters involved in combat will move around, making positioning a key strategic element. Still, the move to an RPG-like battle system is a major change for the series, because sure, Yakuza is often compared to Grand Theft Auto, but it's really an RPG at heart, and now it finally plays like one too. For its 8th expansion, World of Warcraft takes players to the Shadowlands, a purgatory-like realm where characters go after they die, but before they're resurrected. However, the 5 new zones and grand new plot lines are a little less important than some of the other big changes Shadowlands brings with it. When Shadowlands launches, the entire World of Warcraft leveling experience will be revamped. Instead of topping out at level 130, all character progression will be smushed into a mere 60 levels, and new characters will be able to level up by working through the previous World of Warcraft expansion of their choice. choice. Character customization will be deeper than ever too, and upon reaching level 60, you'll be able to join one of 4 covenants, which give you new, unique powers. Best of all though is Torghast, Tower of the Damned, a roguelike inspired dungeon that changes every time you enter, making a nice change for players tired of grinding the same dungeons over and over again. In most Animal Crossing games, your avatar moves into an established village that's already chock full of houses to explore and critters to meet. In Animal Crossing New Horizons, however, you start with nothing, and that's just one of the ways that New Horizons is shaking up the series' long-established formula. For example, you can now place your furniture outdoors. You can create a character with any skin color that you want to, without having to resort to weird tanning hacks. Instead of buying furniture, you can also make your own using New Horizons' fully featured crafting system, assuming that you've already gathered the right materials, of course. It has true multiplayer co-op that supports up to 8 people at a time, as well as an in-game cell phone, with which you can earn Nook miles by completing tasks for you-know-who. And that's just the beginning. Animal Crossing games are generally designed to last for years, and it should take a very long time to discover everything that New Horizons has to offer. Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more SVG videos about your favorite games are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.